So we come to the last part of the course now, the very last chapter, international trade. International trade is something that you all are aware of as far as the concept is concerned. That you have, say, cameras from Japan, you buy machinery from Germany, and there are so many Chinese products which are there in the market. So you buy different things from different nations. And this basically, what this means is that when international trade takes place, you get access to the best things in the world. So you don't have to buy a second grade camera. You want to buy the best one, you go and buy the Japanese camera, nobody can stop you. Okay, so this is the kind of advantage that trade gives you. International trade gives you access to the products which are basically on the PPF itself. So you don't have to settle for inferior products if international trade is working well. You will be settling for the best of the products. And with international trade, the world can attain the highest welfare, is what mainstream economists say. It is not always true, but we will come to that a little later. So, but right now, just understand that international trade is done so that you can exchange your best with their best, or you can exchange your good with their best, because you still have things to sell, even if it is not the best. You know, Indian cotton is not considered as the best cotton in the world, but we can sell it. Indian onions are not considered the best in the world, but we can sell it. So, I mean, you don't always need to sell the best. As long as you are good at it, you are providing products which are good, you can sell it. Okay? So that's what international trade does. It allows exchange of goods. It allows what you have to be given and what you don't have to be taken. Okay? So that's what trade is all about. And they say that it is, as I said, beneficial to the world. So international trade takes place, but what do we buy things with? Because each nation has its own currency. So I talked about this in one of my lectures, but that was very early. So now let me just repeat that entire story for you. So basically, in the ancient times, whenever international trade used to take place, it used to always take place with gold and silver. And they used to wait. So much of gold, and I'll give you this. So much of gold, and I'll give you this. Okay. सोने की मोहरें से होता था. Basically, you used to be using the gold mohars for any kind of trade. Gold mohars and silver, for that matter. At times copper, but copper not that much. So that was the way the world traded for hundreds of years, hundreds. Maybe thousands. But when the British started taking over the world and the British Empire was formed, I don't know whether you have heard this, that the sun never sets on the British Empire. Why they used to say that about the British Empire was because if you look at the earth, then some parts of the earth are night and some parts of the earth are day. British Empire covered the entire earth. I mean, all different places of earth. So wherever the sun would be, at least some part of British Empire would have sun. That's why they used to say the sun never sets in the British Empire. Now, what happened because of this was that say, for example, there is a French colony or a Portuguese colony, or there is an independent nation like Japan, which needed to trade. Now, when they needed to trade with somebody else, they used to use gold, as I told you. But then they realized that, okay, I have earned something from this particular nation, which is in British Empire, say India. They bought something from India, and then they were paid in mohars if they want, or they could be paid in the British currency. Over a period of time, everybody realized that if you trade with British currency, that currency is going to be accepted in most part of the world because the British Empire was so big. The sun never set on the British Empire. So what happened was, even if it was a neighboring country, they accepted British currency because from the British currency, you could buy almost everything that you wanted to. And then everybody started doing that. So even if the two nations, which had nothing to do with Britain, traded with each other, they both had British currency because most of the trade was anyway happening in British currency. That is how pound sterling became international currency. And today, that international currency has become dollars. So without going into the great history of how dollar became international currency, let me just tell you that after the Second World War, the most powerful nation economically was USA. And under Marshall Plan, USA had given loans to almost all the nations which fought in the Second World War. So once again, the only money that all these nations had was US dollars. So they started trading in US dollars, and soon US dollars became the international trade currency. So now when you trade with other nations, you don't pay in terms of gold, you pay in terms of US dollars. International currency is always the currency which is accepted by everybody, knowing that with this currency, I will be able to go anywhere in the world and buy whatever that I want. Today, dollar is that currency. Tomorrow, it can be some other currency, but today it is dollar. Now, so international currency is dollars. But when you are trading, how do I decide how much rupees will I have to give to get $1? How does that get decided? Now, that it's decided by simple rules of demand and supply. So say, for example, after 2008, in 2009 and 2010, when US economy was going down, European economies were going down after the recession, Indian economy and BRICS for that matter, Brazil and Russia and India and China and South Africa, these economies were not yet going down. So what happened was that if you wanted to invest, you always want to invest in an economy which is growing. All these economies were growing. So they wanted to invest in these economies, including India. So what happened was that they wanted to invest in India, which means that now they will buy rupees with dollars. So they will sell dollars, they will buy rupees, and they will invest in India with that. So demand for rupees started going up. As demand for rupees started going up, rupee appreciated vis-a-vis dollar. Okay. And then when recession was ending, which is like 2-3 years back, when recession was ending, US currency now was stronger because people started investing in USA once again. US economy was picking up. BRICS economies were going down. So now people were selling whatever investment they had in India or Russia or China, and they were buying back dollars. Demand for dollars increased. Demand for BRICS currencies decreased. So rupee became weaker compared to US dollars. This is how it works. Okay. So if you are producing something like, say, petroleum, your currency generally is going to be very strong because your currency will always be in demand. People would always need your currency to buy petroleum. Okay, so as far as most of the Middle Eastern nations are concerned, their exchange rate with USA is very high compared to India. Okay, so this is how it all works, by simple forces of demand and supply. Okay, so that is how the rate of conversion gets decided in a free market. But understand that a foreign currency or foreign exchange is not always available freely. Till 1990, India had very strict restrictions on foreign exchange. So even if you want to travel to some other nation, you have to take the permission of Reserve Bank of India to get so much of dollars so that you can travel. And that also Reserve Bank of India gave only limited amount, not much. So there are times when the markets are not free. So that's why understand these terms: fixed exchange rate versus floating exchange rate. So as far as the fixed exchange rate is concerned, the nation decides that I want the price to be this. Remember, when I was teaching you demand and supply, I had shown you a diagram where I said that this is the demand and supply and this is the equilibrium point here. Now, if the government decides the price to be below that, then what would happen? Remember? And we said that there would be black market and things like that because demand will be more than supply, etc., etc. And I had told you that the only way this can work, government deciding a price which is below the market price, the only way this will work is if the nation uses rationing. And that is what is true about fixed exchange rate also. You decide that this is going to be your exchange rate. Say, for example, right now, rupee is trading for something like say 65 to 70 rupees per dollar. You say no, rupee will be trading for only 50 rupees per dollar. We will not give more than 50 rupees. The fact is that the market is not demanding your rupee so much, your rupee's value is less. How do I make the rupee's value more? I make rupee disappear from the market. So rupees are not available unless you come to the government and buy rupees from the government with the dollars. That is fixed exchange rate. Then the government will give you only so much, but then the free trade will not be allowed at all. There would be only so much foreign currency which we will be able to buy, because only that would ensure that the demand for, or rather the supply of rupee will remain the same, but the demand for dollar will go down. And that is how you will attain equilibrium at this lower rate. So fixed exchange rate always comes with strong restrictions on foreign exchange market. Foreign exchange market does not exist at all. You buy only as much as your government allows you to buy, so that the rate does not get disturbed. Okay, so that is fixed exchange rate. And floating exchange rate is the exchange rate, which is the exchange rate determined by the market by the forces of demand and supply. Okay, why a nation would want to go for fixed exchange rate, I will explain a little later. But for now, just understand that in fixed exchange rate, the market is completely restricted and the government decides the exchange rate. Floating exchange rate, to actually get to understand what is the value of your currency. Okay. Now, how does RBI affect the exchange rate if it is a floating exchange rate? If it is fixed, then though there is no issue. The RBI does not give you dollars at all. You have to take permission of RBI to buy dollars. But if the floating exchange rate is there, then, and if you want rupee to become stronger in the market, because you suddenly find that rupee is sinking. If rupee becomes lesser and lesser in value, then things like say petroleum will become more and more expensive for us, because what that means is that for the same $75 per barrel, now you will have to pay so many more rupees because the rupee has depreciated. So how do we correct this? We don't usually correct it because Reserve Bank of India does not have that much dollars in deposit. But at times it intervenes a little bit. So if it finds that the rupee is unduly sinking, then it will start buying US dollars, or sorry, selling US dollars and buying rupee. So if you sell US dollars in the foreign currency market and start buying rupees, you are increasing the demand for rupees and decreasing the demand for dollars, which means that rupee will become stronger. So whenever rupee is sinking, Reserve Bank of India will sell dollars and buy Indian rupee. Whenever rupee is appreciating too much, Reserve Bank of India will sell Indian rupee and buy US dollars. Okay. But as I told you, you have to have that many dollars to play around with. More often than not, we don't. So that's the reason why these operations are very limited. I'm sorry. I'll now continue the rest of the lecture in the next class so that you understand these concepts better.